2, and we are recording with Dr. Samuel Moyn, author of Humane, and I remember Humane, but I always butcher the title, How the United States Abandoned Peace and Reinvented War, available on Audible. Fantastic narration voice. I highly recommend it. But before I go into it and start fanboying, which is what I do with authors, I'm going to have you introduce yourself for all the audience listeners, just real quick, who you are, what you're about, etc.
I'm a teacher. I've taught at a few universities, teaching at Yale now, and I'm from Missouri. I study history and law, and I teach in a law school now. Sometimes I teach undergrad history, and it's a pleasure to be part of this podcast.
I appreciate it, man. So I've had on this podcast a couple times an author, Will Arkin, and perhaps my favorite book of his is the generals wear no clothes, or the generals have no clothes. I had him on earlier this year, but your book reminded me of his, or vice versa. I think yours might have come out before his. And how he puts it forward is, instead of winding down the military industrial complex, it's a lot simpler to just change our their mission statements, what they're going to do, what exactly the initiative is, much like, so today's Tuesday, December 21st, 2021. It's been about 80 years and 2 weeks since the United States has declared war, but no one in their right mind thinks the United States hasn't been at war in 80 years and 2 weeks. But that's what happens when you change the definition of something. And what Mr. Arkin puts forward is that you just change what our targets are. Instead of targeting this country or this person, we are now targeting extremism. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's purposely vague so that it can be that way. And it shows this perpetuation. So for everyone listening, they may be wondering, how is this tied to your book? You bring up the very important question and you examine it. Can war be made humane? And, it's, on one hand, you want to believe it can. You want to believe that it's possible. You want to believe that you can take baby steps towards that direction, right? It's kind of that stereotype. Everyone in AA drinks a lot of coffee. And it's like, well, they just move from one drug to another. But, and I know I'm ranting, but at some point, you do look at it and you go, you know what? It's better that they're drinking coffee than drinking alcohol. And you kind of take the win. And so you have that mindset. On the other hand, you have cold turkey, zero tolerance. And that's kind of Curtis LeMay saying that war should be so intolerable. It should be so horrific that we avoid it. And that whole rant is kind of how I'm viewing your book. It's this, are we taking the little win that we can, or are we like Will Arkin? Are we pushing it down the road forever by just, well, it's more humane than last time, guys. It's more humane than last time, but it never actually ends. And because I'm rude and never stop talking, what are your thoughts on that? Is my analysis anywhere near correct, or?
It's right on, and I'm with Arkin that, the diagnosis as you kind of reconstructed is, I think insightful, and it's widely shared that somehow America has ended up a warmongering country, and it is an addiction in your analogy, and it's proved very hard to kick it, but then the question is why, and there are a bunch of reasons, and the forces of perpetuation are really kind of powerful, and I'm just looking at one little one, although I think it was really significant at certain points in the recent past, and it's this possibility of trying to make war humane. Now, you can trivialize it. First of all, you can deny it and say that war is hell, it can't be humane. Humane war is an oxymoron. I don't think so. At least we have to acknowledge war can be made more humane, and there are differences in the forms of war. And it is, on one level, it's almost offensive to trivialize it in as much as, 57,000 died in Vietnam on the American side, a tenth of that, or maybe a fifth die in a war on terror that lasts 5 times as long so far. On the other side of the ledger, victims, you know, 5 million people died in the Vietnam War on the other side. And, we're coming up on a million at the very, at the outside in
Mm-hmm.
the war on terror. And again, in a war chronologically 5 times as long. And if you're one of those 4 million people that, didn't die in the war on terror because war is more humane, you're grateful.
Yeah.
However, you're right that there's always the alternative of zero.
Yeah.
And I'm with the people who are then worried that, well, what if sometimes the good is the enemy of the perfect or the better?
Mm-hmm.
And what if, like, making war humane has helped perpetuate it? Maybe it has, maybe it hasn't. We can get into that. But if that's a possibility, we should stare it in the face and figure out what to do about it.
Yeah, it really is this sort of weird. It's very easy for us to say, how dare you try to make war humane? You're putting makeup on a pig. And it's like, yeah, 5 million Indo-Chinese and 58,000 Americans versus, not to, I have on a lot of veterans on this show,
Yep.
but I was just talking to a Delta Force guy, but a
Yep.
million, yes, that is 4 million less, 5,000,
Yeah.
7,000 soldiers. No trivial thing. I'm not trying to make light of those
Yeah.
burials. There are 51,000 Vietnamese analogs, if you will, Vietnamese soldiers who didn't die. And it's
Right.
this odd balance, right? It's so, do we want to say that if it's not perfect, we can't do it? I can't go a podcast without mentioning this. I lost a brother to suicide in 2014. And I was on some
I'm sorry.
hardcore, I appreciate it, man. I was on some hardcore anxiolytics afterwards, clonazepam, right? And it was on them for like 6 months. And finally, it was like, I have to get off this shit. This can't go on forever. And I
Right.
went cold turkey. Very lucky my mom's a nurse and I had an actual medical
Wow.
professional with me.
Wow.
But I have had friends who were also on those drugs for other reasons. And I would always say, you just got to kick it. You can't negotiate with it. And they would kick it and they would keep falling back into it. And after several years of falling back into it, I had to re-examine it and go, is the perfect the enemy of the good? And so finally, I've had friends, obviously remain private, but, move to a lesser one, maybe like a small
Sure.
dose of Valium. And then a year later,
Sure.
they moved to just Benadryl to help them sleep. And a year after that, now they just take melatonin. And on one
Wow.
hand, you could go, you're just perpetuating drugs. But on the other hand, I
Yeah.
go, yeah, but kind of like the 5 million to the 1 million, it's
Of
like
course.
they went from clonazepam to now they're just taking a melatonin.
Exactly.
You can't tell me that's not
Exactly.
a win.
Exactly.
But it, like
It
all
is a
things,
win.
it is. It
So
is.
we're debating, like, not whether they're often we've got an easy choice where there's one good thing and one bad thing.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's much more difficult because we have one thing that's better and then another that's ideal.
Yeah.
And the question is, of course, can we have the better alternative to what's already a step in the right direction? And a lot of people, when it comes to war, say you can't, that we should, let's say, rest content with endless but more humane war, because not only can we not get rid of war, we wouldn't want to. We got to fight it sometimes.
Yeah.
And at least we've made it more humane when it comes.
Yeah.
Now, I think, I'm a lot older than you, so you can agree or disagree with this. Every war that I've seen America fight in my lifetime, and therefore in yours, has made America and the world worse off.
Yeah.
And so if you find me a war that's worth fighting, then I'm for a humane version of it.
Yeah.
But the first and most important question is, should we be doing it?
Yeah.
And if the answer is routinely no, maybe always no, then we've got another problem, which is we don't have an anti-war movement. We have a humane war as our generation's highest goal,
Yeah.
and that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah. No, there's a fly flying around here making me look like an idiot. Yeah, it's I listened to your book twice, and that really was the conclusion I came to is like, I mean, it's so simple to just say, well, it's hard. There's no gray area. You can say all the cliches, damned if you do, damned. We're not really getting anywhere. And it's what I have concluded is I 100% agree. As we make this more humane, we are in a way normalizing it. On the other side of me, it's like, let's take the cold, hard, your mom will kind of like butter up a problem. She'll be, we need to talk about your grades. And your dad will kind of come in and be like, listen up, shithead. You kind of need that cold, hard reality. You step back and you look at all of
Yeah,
human history, and you look at the mass death and suffering. You look at the Great War. You look at World War II, right? Some 415,000 American soldiers dead. You look at Korea.
yeah,
You look at Vietnam.
sure,
You look at, Desert Storm, War on Terror. You're right. Give me a just war. Have we had a just war since August 9th, 1945? I mean, I'd say maybe if you could pinpoint Bin Laden, maybe Tora Bora, whatever it was called.
sure.
Sometimes you got to take the cold, hard reality and go, all of human history, from the Great Pyramids to Alexander the Great to drones over Yemen. The reality is it is becoming less and less lethal for the population at large. Yes, it would be great if we were all holding hands and our countries ran on nuclear fusion, but
Right,
often we have to take what we can get. And what we
that's
can
right.
get right now is making it more humane, making it more, what did Chelsea Manning, or was this what was it, the leaking of the shooting of the van with the machine gun, and that
Right,
was
right.
uproar. But I mean, you go
Sure.
back to World War II, man. We firebombed Dresden, and okay, what's next?
Yeah. Or celebrated,
Yes, yes,
especially when it was in Japan,
yeah,
without a second thought. And now we have a conscience, but um, we keep going. We make it less flagrant. The funny thing is you fall into a rut in a sense, because always you have the picture of the video leaked, or you
yeah,
have the critical journalist publishing in the New York Times about how it's still really friggin' brutal.
yeah,
And then we say, oh well, you know it you can't make war more humane, even though the revelations um, point to like systemic failures by the military, but they're still in a different category than what you saw over Japan in 1945
yeah,
or in Korea. I mean, one of the amazing things I discovered and report in the book is folks who serve in Korea and Vietnam and get to Vietnam and say, you think this was
yeah,
bad?
yeah,
You
yeah,
should have been in Korea,
yeah,
where like it was like a smoking holocaust
oh yeah,
that the B-52s caused there, and we're being nice this time.
yeah,
And yet, and then if you compare that to the war on terror, you really the war is changing.
yes,
And yet, if we always push it to be more and more humane, where does that go if we never isolate the at least the wars that aren't worth fighting, or about which we're having second thoughts? And we're seeing that under Joe Biden, where he's finally ended at least one big form of the
hmm
war on terror, and we
hmm
can get into whether how big a deal that is, since he also said he would continue the other big form.
yeah. It's it's for everyone listening. In your book, they talk about Korea, they talk again LeMay, but I mean just the destruction, the scorched earth, and set fires,
Yeah,
and we saw people putting the fires out, you strafe them, and you get to
yeah,
Vietnam and they're like, isn't war hell? And they're like, what? They're like, dude, were you
yeah,
in Korea?
yeah.
And you're
No, we're being really careful. I
yeah,
mean, it's absolutely unbelievable.
yeah, and you can only imagine, you could probably grab one of those Korean guys going, "Isn't this hell?" And there's probably some guy that was at the Battle of the Bulge and was like, "Boy, what'd you say?
Exactly.
What'd you just,
Exactly. No, I mean,
yeah, my great uncle passed away like 10 years ago. He was 18
yeah,
on Omaha Beach.
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, man, you bring him to present day. I don't know if you, and I don't want to
yeah,
put words in his mouth. I don't know if you would bat an eye at the war on terror. I mean, you lose
yeah,
5,000 taking the beach at Guadalcanal, and it's
exactly.
and it's very easy. Well, then let's play devil's advocate. Tommy,
Yeah.
Sam, you guys you're making this humane. You're making the war machine more palatable. Yes, but sometimes you can't go cold turkey on Xanax. Sometimes you have to take
Yep.
baby steps to Benadryl, and it's you take the win any way you
I,
can.
I'm accepting that.
Yeah,
But here's the thing, we got to change analogies because
yeah,
it wasn't that Barack Obama, who's like the main character of my book, he's not like saying, oh, we tried to kick it and we just decided we'd do this lesser form of it. He owns it and he says, we're good people
hmm,
for fighting war and making it humane. We're doing the right thing. It's not
yeah,
like a lesser evil.
yeah,
Um, because we have to fight sometimes and terrorists threaten, which they do. And then we're like we're not like people who can't give up an addiction and have chosen, to take Xanax.
hmm,
uh we're it's a different analogy because
yeah,
he's actually claiming that we're in the best possible world. If we're threatened, then of course we fight,
yeah.
and we're good people. It's not like there's a better alternative than this.
Yeah, he's kind of Hunter S. Thompson, right? Where he's like, "Yeah, I wake up
Okay.
and take LSD," and it's like, "Oh, you're not even trying to kick it. You're owning."
Yeah,
Which,
yeah, okay, that's
yeah,
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
He's
But
he's basically saying, I mean, he's saying like brutal war sucks, but then when he comes to humane war, he's like, this is ideal.
and
And so he's not like he's not regretting it in the same way as you would if you basically wanted to end the addiction. Now, in
yeah,
fairness, when he rolled out the drone program, as I narrate, this is at the National Defense University in 2013, he's accosted by this anti-war activist
hmm,
who gets ejected. She heckles him. And then he goes off script and he said, maybe America shouldn't fight endless war. Where is that going to take the country?
yeah,
It's going to degrade us.
yeah.
And consider what's happened since Obama. But then he goes on to say, he returns to his script, which is, we are good people because we're fighting the best of all possible wars.
Yeah, in that vignette in your book, I think President Obama says, she wasn't entirely wrong. This fly, I swear to God,
Yeah,
making me look like Mike Pence during the debates. He
absolutely.
he
No,
says
that's right.
he says uh he says she's not entirely wrong, but I don't think she entirely heard me. And
Yeah, he's like, we got to listen to her and I want to respond. But she wasn't listening to me either.
which is just as bad. If we dig our
Yeah,
heels and go, no, Mr.
well, for
Obama,
sure.
no, Mr. Trump, no, Mr. Biden, no wars whatsoever. It's like, well, dude,
Yeah,
now we're gonna be doing this. We're truly gonna be doing this.
correct.
You have to wonder, do you get into office? And I don't mean in
Right.
some and then the
No,
Illuminati. No, I mean, do you get into office? Do you get all the
I agree.
classified briefings? Do you look at the geopolitical? Do you look at 7 billion people? Do you look at trade routes, global warming, resource
Yep.
wars? And do you come out of it and go, dude, we're literally doing like the best possible scenario. Like you have to
Right.
trust me. And it's easy to not trust them. But
Of course. Well, but I thought we agreed that, we had all these big wars and, rising military budgets, and what do we have to show for it exactly? Now, I understand and that when you're in power and you're given the, daily brief by the Central Intelligence
yeah,
officer and they tell you about a list of scary things
the
happening
sky's
right then,
falling. Yeah.
you can't be a pacifist as president. And frankly, Obama got the peace prize and he went to Oslo and said, you didn't think I was a man of peace at the height of the world's greatest military superpower. um, but at least I'm going to do it humanely. So, and yet I think that we see, these presidents get elected by opposing wars. Obama first off against Hillary Clinton in 2008. Donald Trump, when he comes out against his fellow Republicans in February 2016, South Carolina, he says Iraq was dumb and a mistake. And you couldn't say that before then in Republican circles.
No.
And far from tanking, he wins. And then he beat Hillary again. And then Biden wins, campaigning against the forever war. So somebody thinks that we're doing war too much. And the presidents understand that when they're running as anti-war candidates. Then they become endless war presidents in office. They're listening to the daily brief. And I get totally that, Americans demand security. I'm one of them.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, when we Monday morning quarterback it, we say, well, wait a second, we made the world worse repeatedly.
Yeah.
And actually we created more terrorists along the way. So where does that leave us? Well, we can't just say we just let it run because we demand security. We say we need a way of constraining presidents from repeatedly making mistakes as we see them in retrospect.
And I think, there's always the Monday morning quarterbacking. You have to wonder, are we giving these guys too much credit? Are they actually anti-endless war, or is that a face they put on, or do they actually get in, and do they get in there, and are there, state actors in the CIA, who are all for the revolving door of the military industrial complex, and they come in and, the sky is falling, China's going to kill us all tomorrow if you don't do this.
Sure.
But again, it's almost like you got to zoom out and go, we can sit here. We tried to be isolationists in World War I. And like you said, Woodrow Wilson prosecuted everyone that was against it. We tried in World War II. And again, 80 years ago this month, we were doing the Lend-Lease program, but eventually the reality is sometimes it comes to your front door. Pearl Harbor, 9/11.
No doubt. I mean,
sometimes it's here.
I'm for World War II. I mean, 9/11 is a different case since it's a terrorist band. It's not a state.
Not a state actor.
But and it's not an enemy on par with Nazis or commies.
Not at all. Not at all.
It's a regulatory problem. And, we end up killing. I mean, consider how many, like we lost a few thousand and then we went on and killed, 3,000 times as many people in response, including many more innocent than we lost. So no, but I agree with you. And the Chinese Cold War is already on. And the military budget just voted through is higher than ever, and we're going to do something with the money. So, the question is, do we need to fight another round of war with climate change and Chinese, threats in various places and as just a general rival? Well, I hope less than in the last 100 years, because it just doesn't seem like we have a lot of improvement to show for it. And it's not clear to me that, like, was it worth fighting Vietnam?
No.
Was that a good idea?
Not at all.
Was it worth fighting the war on terror? Was that a good idea? So why aren't we in that mindset when it comes to the Chinese conflict on the way?
Sure. And no, it absolutely. I mean, I've had on Gordon Chang. I've had on Brigadier General Robert Spalding from Obama's National Security Council. His book Stealth War, all about the rising Chinese threat.
Right.
It is, and for everyone listening to this, they're like, what side are you guys coming down on? And as you and I are we're schizophrenic. We're arguing both points, but it's was Vietnam worth it? Not at all. Were any of these things worth it? I mean, really not since World War II. It's
right. And that's when we were attacked. And more than that, Adolf Hitler declared war on us 2 days after Pearl Harbor. If he hadn't have done that,
well, he's just a moron.
It's not total moron. But he thought, well, I'm gonna win. And and plus but at any rate, that
It's
we could have just had the Pacific War in that case. And it's really, we played the lesser role in
sure,
beating Hitler in Europe. um
sure.
and so it there are righteous wars to fight. I'm not a pacifist,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
when you go down the list, there aren't a lot of them. And then we have this coming one, and it's still unclear to me if China actually has big geopolitical ambitions and whether they're military in nature.
yeah,
We have this South China Sea thing brewing, but that's nearby. We
yeah,
invaded Cuba,
yeah,
120 years ago,
yeah,
and a lot of other places in this hemisphere. And didn't permit Europeans to get involved in those.
yeah,
Um, and so it's not clear to me what the nature of the threat is and whether we need to think about a military response, especially when we have this track record of failure
yeah,
precisely in the military domain.
yeah. It's to I've had on here before Richard Rhodes, author of Making the
Hmm.
Atomic Bomb, and
Right.
at the beginning of his book Dark Sun, The Making of the Hydrogen Bomb, he does talk about LeMay. And when LeMay got to Europe in what maybe I don't know, like spring, summer 20 or not 2042, 1942,
Yep.
the rate at which our planes were being shot down by the Nazis paired with the rate at which we were building new planes,
Yep.
it was a negative ratio,
Absolutely.
to the point where
Absolutely.
LeMay writes, and I think his journal, he just does the quick math, for every
Yep.
within 30 days we won't have an air force. And
Right.
LeMay gave that or touched on that again like 10 years later when he was mastering strategic air command. And that's what he said. He goes, I will never forget the feeling of knowing we're within 30 days of not having an air force, and I'm watching these Nazis destroy Europe, and Pearl Harbor's 2 months in the rearview mirror. And that
Yep.
is what led him to create or to master Strategic Air Command, headquartered off it, to have he called it the Sunday punch, your ability to nuke an entire nation. Killing a nation
Yep.
is what he called it.
Yep.
Maybe, I mean, and now I'm just playing this side. Maybe you look at Pearl Harbor. Maybe you
Yep.
are, LeMay on the ground, not you and I talking about it, but
Yep.
you're there
Yep.
and you're looking at this and you're going, if I make it through this, I will never allow this to happen again. Maybe there's a reality. Maybe there's a reality where we don't have a bloated defense budget and there are Vietnam skirmishes every year. And we'd be going,
Yep.
maybe, and this is now I'm a shill for Northrop Grumman,
Yep.
maybe if we had an enormous army, there would still be
Sure.
skirmishes and still be losses of life, but
Well,
we
we
wouldn't
know
have.
that's the case.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We know that's
I
the
mean, look
reality
at
we
the
know.
military budget relative to any other power, and the next 8 combined
It's
don't come
insane.
anywhere
Oh, oh,
near what we vote for.
oh,
So,
you're preaching to the choir.
and
Yeah,
it's and what is the effect of that? So, um, maybe it's big. And actually, like I talk in the book about, Leo Tolstoy, whose
mm-hmm.
character says, we should leave war brutal because then we'll have less of it, and we should just make it friggin' scary. And that's what Sherman thinks, and that's what LeMay it's like a time-honored tradition, shock and awe, and that's how you reduce the incidence of war. Doesn't seem like that's working out to my liking, because you've got the shock and awe on occasion, but you seem to be creating perpetual enemies. And
Yeah,
of course, the fact that you're gearing up for the next war with constantly increasing expenditures, you know, suggests that we don't even think that, having just way outstripped anyone else in armament and capacity does the job, because we
sure.
just buy more and more, and there's always the next technological innovation.
Yeah,
So eh, you take this thing in Ukraine where we're scared the Russians are going to invade,
yeah,
and yet their expenditures militarily are like a tenth of ours.
yeah,
Um, Either it's the case that like they're going to lose badly, or it turns out that like if it's near you and you really want to fight, you can beat a superior power. Either way, you know, it's not clear to me that this idea that like spending a lot and killing a lot of people keeps war at bay. Very hard to establish that.
Yeah. The idea of LeMay said this. Now I'm going right against
Yeah,
myself. Is LeMay said this, and it's like he did say that, but now we do have it,
yeah,
and we've had it for
yeah.
decades.
Correct.
Where are we at? Why did we just?
Correct.
I think
Correct.
you said it in your book, right? The you adjusted for inflation that the cost of World War I, right? And it
Yeah.
was, I think it was what, 3 trillion, maybe 2 trillion,
Yeah. Yeah.
and now we have what, adjusted for inflation. What was the war in Iraq? What, 6 or 8? Let's say on
Yeah.
the low end.
Yeah.
Let's say on the low end, six.
Yeah.
Still
Yeah.
double.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now you could like as I always do. Now I'm just jumping sides again. You could argue 3 trillion and what, like 50 million deaths, 6 trillion and 1 million deaths.
Right.
That's not nothing. Maybe you go, is the price tag? I don't know. There isn't a good answer, because you're right. We're talking about
Well,
all these things, and yet here we are beating the drums, China rising, and it's like,
sure. I mean, I think like we're clearly spending a lot on the new forms of war, which will make it very hard to predict not just the outcome, but like to establish like some kind of law about the price versus the outcome. So, you know, if the contest is mainly like cyber war
mhm,
and drone or robot, well, we haven't seen that yet, you
yeah,
know, and we know it's costly
yeah,
because Northrop Grumman and et cetera demand a lot of have gotten very rich, and we're willing to pay for what they're bringing online. But then you get the actual war. Well, we haven't been in a
yeah,
full-blown cyber war, and we haven't been in a robot war.
yeah,
And I don't think you can predict that there'll be fewer casualties. I mean, if you imagine World War III, China versus US, fought with drones and robots, are you saying that just because it's a lot pricier, the casualties are going to be lower? Well, I sounds pretty
I feel like that
unlikely to me,
it's eventually going to escalate to, after a
right?
couple years of killing each other's drones, someone's going to go, how about if we just made it so unpalatable for the Americans, they wanted to end it, and now we're right back at
Right.
firebombing cities.
Well, right. Yeah, exactly. And when it becomes existential, all bets are off, and you use any tool in the arsenal, maybe not
Exactly.
nukes, but maybe nukes. And so one thing that has to be clear is that, you know, my book, which is about humane war, is about a form of war that can be credible before we're anywhere near the existential, either in these asymmetrical counterinsurgent conflicts like against terrorists, where you have the upper hand from day one and they're just a tough opponent because they blend in, because they run, because they're deterritorialized and you can't find them. Um, and or in like the early stages of a contest with China, which could take the form of conventional war, or proxy war, depending on who we arm and where we're fighting. I think it would be, you know, fought according to the current rules, which require more humanity. Like we wouldn't target civilians in the early days, but if it becomes existential, it's all bets are off. And
Yeah.
you know, the embarrassment of these rules that I wrote my book about is that, you know, it gets existential pretty quick. World War One, all the rules are ignored. You know, World War Two, all the rules are ignored. You know, World War III, they'd be ignored. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't care about like, you know, conflicts short of the existential. And that's what I'm trying to write about, because it's in those that we can say, well, these rules, which make war more humane, could have this cost
Yeah.
that we keep on fighting. And actually, maybe the escalation is there. You know, so maybe if we take a more conciliatory attitude towards China and say, okay, well, um, maybe you need to get rowdy in the South China Sea, it's your backyard. And we need to do something, to try to stop it, because Taiwan is, a thriving democracy, and we need to protect it to the extent we can. But do we want to go to World War III over Taiwan?
Yeah.
Then you get to, the kind of larger geopolitics. Does China want world domination the way that Hitler and we thought Stalin did? They want to be rich. They want to be
Sure.
equal. Uh, we're way richer. Well, we had a good run. Can they not be rich? Can they not have the same lifestyle as us, even if
Sure.
they become a great power? I don't have a problem with it.
Net,
Why should they make iPhones and not get to use them?
net,
So,
Netflix for
I don't know
everybody.
that we need to fight a war over them becoming equal. I
It's
don't get that one.
it's almost.
And so if we're more conciliatory, maybe we don't need to get to World War III.
I think that's a beautiful point. I think you're right. It's the Cuban Missile Crisis was it was kind of theory meets reality, mutual assured destruction, and they finally, it went from proxy to it finally got real. Russian or
Yep.
Soviet frigates and freighters and American destroyers, and we're right there, baby, and we're looking at each other in the eye, and it's almost like two guys talking shit. Sam, you want to take this
Hmm.
outside, bro? You want, we're
Right.
both 12 beers deep. You want to take it? And we go outside,
Yep.
and it's like, do I really want to hit you? And you're like, my wife
Right.
is here. And it's like, what are we doing? And it's like, that
Yep.
is Cuban Missile Crisis, which is a weird soundbite, does give
Yep.
me hope because we did walk up to the brink and we
Absolutely.
and we went, yo, Cuba, what the fuck are we doing? And it's,
Yeah.
are we going to be there with Taiwan? Are we going to be there with
Yeah.
Ukraine? Are we there? Is the embargo there? Do you have
Right.
a Bobby Kennedy reaching out to the equivalent of or equivalent Bobby Kennedy reaching out to Beijing
Yep.
back channel and going,
Yep.
we'll get rid of these things in Turkey. You guys take them out of here. Let's all go home.
Yeah.
I, man,
It could
it's
go either way,
it could
but
go, or it could be a nuclear
they're
holocaust.
yeah, they're going to be, well, I don't see the US initiating a nuclear war over Taiwan and China either.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, Ukraine, it's hard to say, but you're right that in both of these kinds of conflicts, there could be brinksmanship, and then you could have like an exit ramp at the last minute. Now,
yeah,
let's hope we don't come to that, because
yeah,
again, who's winning these things?
yeah,
We kept the nukes out of Cuba, but Cuba is under communist rule today, all these years
yeah,
later, and they were never a threat to the homeland.
yeah,
So what, I mean, the nukes would have been for sure, but it's like, what was at stake, after, I understand making sure that we weren't under nuclear threat was at stake, but it's not like the Cuban people ended up free,
yeah,
to this day. And with Taiwan, a lot's at stake in a sense. Um, but we could protect Taiwan, and China is still under communist domination. So
yeah. I mean, it's
again, like, where how what's the long game in these kinds of scenarios?
to quote to quote the great Dr. Moyn from about 30 minutes ago. It's easy to say a million deaths is absolutely unacceptable, but if you're one of the
Right.
1 million civilian deaths as opposed to the 5 million in Vietnam,
Yeah.
you're not saying that's nothing.
Correct.
If in the parallel universe where there's a nuclear holocaust versus you live in communist China or communist Cuba, not to make light of their
True.
situations, you might
Totally true.
you might go, hey man, it's this or nuclear winter. And I know
Totally true.
those are very binary, and it's
No,
easy
no,
for
I
me
like
to, yeah,
that point. My book is really about like alternative forms of war and alternatives within war. But of
yeah,
course, at the end we have to zoom out and say, well, look, if we don't fight this war, if we don't fight the war on terror, there's going to be a cost.
yeah,
Like, consider that, like, certain kinds of secular people were benefited by ousting the Taliban for almost 2 decades before
absolutely,
they came back.
absolutely,
And that, you can't deny that. But then what that was on one side of the ledger. On the other side of the ledger was, 800,000 deaths, and the perpetuation of terrorism and the rise of ISIS, and all kinds of things that you know seem bad. And so I agree that in the end we have to ask, what is the net benefit or cost of our policy, because there are going to be some good things and bad things, and we need to like add them up. And my only perception is that when I add it all up, most of the wars have made the world worse.
Absolutely. Oh, undeniably. It's
So let's just like let's take a little bit more care. Let's like fight a couple fewer in the next 50 years than we have in the last 50 years,
I
because on net we're better off.
absolutely. I think what we will see, and I think what we will see is it'll probably be something akin to the Korean veterans in Vietnam. Maybe there's a skirmish in South China, a proxy skirmish or something. Maybe it's, the whatever, it starts in 2035. And it's man, can you believe that? We've been at year for we've been at war with whatever, we've been backing Ukraine for 2 years, and the death toll just passed 500. And you go, hey, I'm not making light of that, man, but like I
Yeah,
watched the Twin Towers fall in middle school. Like this is a lot less worse. And all of a sudden
yep,
you kind of get the Korea guy. You go, it's all bad. Every death is bad, but on the
sure.
grand scheme of things, like, are we not? But then there's also this whole, you know, someone with nefarious intent could take that argument I made earlier: 3 trillion, 50 million dead in World War One versus 6 trillion, but only a million dead
Yeah,
in War on Terror. Well, now,
yeah,
you can use that to hold the world hostage. You go, we have to have
sure.
100 trillion. Do you want the deaths
Yeah,
down? And now it's like,
yeah.
well, what
Okay,
game are
now
we
hold
playing?
on though, because just to go back, what
Sure.
we should be careful to distinguish are the comparisons that are solely within war, and then
Yeah.
the ones that are even broader. So on the Korea Vietnam thing, we can say, oh yeah, Vietnam much less brutal, and but per capita, and in the time allowed, I mean, probably m- like less grievous overall. Korea just horrendous. And you can get out the tote boards and so forth, but let's say your comparison holds, but then you look at them geopolitically and you say, okay, we went into Korea basically to save South Korea from communist domination. As I narrate in the book, Douglas MacArthur makes this fateful decision to keep going and push the commies back and maybe eject them from the whole peninsula. Well, that incites the Chinese to invade, and it
Yeah.
leads to a 3-year war, which puts everything back at the beginning.
Which is where
Total
we are.
waste of time.
Which is
Total
where we are
waste. I mean,
today.
total wait. No reason to fight it. Vietnam, you've said, same. So, like when we compare these two, we zoom out and we say neither of these wars is worth fighting. And so we should do a comparison about between like and like wartime death and injury versus wartime death and injury. But then we have to step back, and that's where you get to World War II and you say, okay, it was incredibly nasty, but it was for a good cause. And it made the world better because it put down these dictators and whatnot, or at least one of them,
Yeah.
Hitler. And then we look at the other wars. It's not that they're necessarily more or less brutal, it's that they were pointless.
Yeah.
Vietnam, war on terror. So let's have a war that has a point and makes the world better, you
Yeah.
know. And of course we need to factor in who dies in it,
Yeah.
but what we need to know, did it make everyone better off or worse off?
Yeah, no, I mean, no, that's a brilliant point. Is it's like, on one hand, you're like, yeah, it costs a little more, but guys, we're losing less people. And it's like, okay, sure, but like, what are we doing? It's like World War
Right,
II. Hey, we
right.
got Hitler to pop himself and we released
Yep.
the Jews from I mean, like Marvel movie level good and
Yeah.
evil. Like,
Yeah.
hey, baby, there we go.
Yeah.
But then it's like with this, it's like, well, yeah, thank God for we did Korea and Vietnam was less. It's like, well, look at a satellite photo of Korea from space at night today. It's the same
Yeah.
bifurcation.
Correct.
What are we doing? And it's It's very easy for you and I sitting in our respective chairs in front of
Yep.
computers, and we're clearly not at war. I get to do a
Yeah.
podcast for a living. You're a professor, you write books. It's very easy for us to perch on ivory
Absolutely.
towers and say how things should be.
Absolutely. I'm totally with you there, and
Yeah.
I don't want power, but
Yeah.
then we still have to reserve the right to
If,
ask hard questions of those who
absolutely.
exercise it.
Absolutely.
So I agree we should concede that they have a hard job and they have to get elected and they have to answer if a terrorist strikes Americans
Yeah.
and kills a lot again.
Yeah.
That said, we look at the tote board and say, let's look at the levels of violence that we inflicted, and then let's zoom out and say, well, where did ISIS come from? And like, how is it that we promised to make Afghanistan a better place and made it much worse, not just for 20 years, but in the end, Taliban beat us.
Oh yeah. Oh no,
We ejected them and they came back
they won.
victorious. So
They won.
it's not, it's, if we have to reserve the space to say that one wasn't worth it and don't
Absolutely.
do it again, or at least think more carefully next time
Yeah.
about the long run.
Yeah. I've I had on right after the suicide bombing at Kabul. I actually
Hmm.
interviewed one of the Marines while he was at the airbase. He was like 14 hours ahead of me. And there's a guy talking, and he's like he knew several of the guys that were killed by the suicide bombing. And it's like you're talking to this young guy, and it's like, here I am in my leather chair, and you see this guy, and he's got bags under his eyes, and he's sitting in front of like a sandbag, and he's talking about it. But then on the other hand, it's like, that's terrible, but man, and hey, I'm a conservative guy. But I give Biden credit for pulling the Band-Aid off, because and I'm not making
Right.
light of those 10 deaths. I mean, I get,
Sure.
like I said, I lost a brother. Like, I understand that, like, it's not just a number, but pulling the Band-Aid off, and okay, maybe not doing it in the cleanest and most organized way. How many cumulative deaths did what if we had just pulled the Band-Aid
Yeah.
off in 2010, and it would have been
Correct.
bad, and we would have had some unnecessary
Correct.
deaths, but we'd have 10 more
Correct.
years of maybe not having another 100 deaths a year. And it's a macabre
Right.
equation. It's,
Yeah.
it's like them calling,
Yeah.
in the Cold War, they call it a mega death, stood for a million
Yeah.
deaths. And it's like, dude,
Yeah.
how can you say, what, Dr. Strangelove, only 30 million
Yeah.
deaths, Mr. President, an acceptable number? And
Right.
it's like, what are we saying? But dude, I don't
That
know.
seems right to me. And of course you empathize. I mean, so, Barack Obama comes to office and he surges in Afghanistan,
Yeah.
brings the troops up to 100,000, and then begins to withdraw as Bush had already begun to do from Iraq. Obama completes the withdrawal in Iraq, and then it takes Trump to try to withdraw from Afghanistan, gets it from 7 to 3,000, and is blocked by various forces.
Yeah.
And then Biden completes the job. And you can ask, like, well, should it have taken this long? When the surge failed, it was just a matter of time. Even by when Biden became president, the Taliban controlled much of the country, especially in the rural areas. And that was in part because we'd created this drone program,
Mhm.
and out of desperation just killed a lot of people, which actually alienated the Afghan, rural
Yeah.
population to support the Taliban. So, my question is not, it is not the good one of like why it took so long to accept the inevitable. It's really more like, should we accept this thing we did in over time from Obama to Biden of pivoting not to greater withdrawal and restraint, but a a targeted killing program using high tech so-called humane weaponry, because that's what happened.
Yeah.
We can debate like the big footprint wars, Afghanistan and Iraq. My story is much more about what they tried to replace it with, what they
Yeah.
successfully replaced it with. And when Biden finally did the job of withdrawal and spoke in its favor. As you say, it was heroic because he faced so much resistance.
Yeah.
But when he spoke about it and justified it, he also said, don't worry, I'm keeping the drones and I'm keeping over the horizon operations. And, Afghanistan's going to become a source of terror even more than before, because remember what happened when the Taliban was in charge of Afghanistan last time. And so, and plus there's the pivot to China
Yeah.
and the drone and robot wars of the future. So it's this period we've just lived through, I think we'll remember not so much or not only for Afghanistan and Iraq as for the invention of this new kind of stealthy humane war, because it's the wave of the future and Biden promised to preserve it.
Yeah, and there's sort of this, and then one just little side note is like we
Yep.
kind of see this thing where it's like Obama wants to shut down Guantanamo Bay, and we have conservatives saying we can't do that, and then we have Trump saying I'm going to withdraw us from Syria, and then we have liberals saying we're abandoning the Kurds, and then we have Biden saying continuing exactly what Trump was doing and saying no, we got to finish it. Now we have conservatives saying what are you doing? At a certain point, it's like guys, I mean,
Yeah.
are we or are we not for forever wars? And if the answer is we are not,
Yeah.
then it doesn't matter if it's Joseph goddamn Biden or Donald fucking Trump. We go, hey, take it home. Like, stop
Right.
the little nitty night
Well,
point,
I
night point.
agree.
It's like but to put that
But we're
aside though,
so far from that because, the resistance hated Trump and
yeah,
they impeached him twice. In the middle of the first impeachment trial, they take a break and they're at each other's throats over Trump, but the Democrats and Republicans vote through the National Defense Authorization Act. And today, we say the Republicans are a fascist party, that's what the Democrats say. And yet,
they're all
they vote through in common, near unanimous, the greatest so no one really believes what we're saying now yet. I
yeah,
mean, our politicians are just like still in the addiction phase. They're not even trying to get off. They're
yeah.
not at cold turkey versus Xanax.
They're not even they're Hunter S.
Like
Thompson.
they're at heroin.
They're at Hunter S. Thompson. They're going, no, it's
Yeah,
cool. It's cool. It's
right,
cool to be the uniparty. And it's like, dude, and it's
right.
that kind of brings up the like, and perhaps I'm doe-eyed and optimist. I do believe Obama wanted to change things, and I think he got in there.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
whereas with a lot of these kind of congressmen, senators, I look at it and I go, I don't even think it's that they got into office and realized it was dark. I think they were just demons in the first place. But that's another
Right.
rant for another time. What I want to say
I
about
think the bigger issue is Congress, has abdicated because the Constitution says they're supposed to be in charge of war.
yeah, well, it's been
And they
80
basically
years and two
said, well,
weeks.
the president can take the heat,
Yeah,
and we'll just fund the thing.
yeah,
So that's a deep pathology.
yeah, yeah,
And it's not about them being good or evil. It's about them avoiding responsibility, which the
yeah,
Constitution actually gives them.
yeah. It's yeah. How do we look back at Vietnam? Well, it was Kennedy, and then it was LBJ, and it's like those are two guys. This was a
Yeah,
multi-billion-dollar, hundreds
of
of thousands
course.
of soldiers of enablers. It wasn't
Of course.
LBJ. It wasn't Jack Kennedy
Of course.
philandering. It was like, dude, it's even now we're talking about Obama, and it's like, yeah, and the trillion-dollar defense
Right.
machine,
Well,
like
exactly. And who voted for all those
the
appropriations bills?
535 guys in there and women. It's
Right. Yeah.
what I wanted to touch on before I lost that train of thought was what you were saying about how this is actually the birth of the new stealth war, the new and we look at World War One, it's like, well, actually the Treaty of Versailles was more of like a ceasefire. And then we do World War Two. And we look at August 9th, 1940, the sailor kissing the nurse. And it's like, well, we're actually there's this whole Berlin airlift thing. It's just gonna take a couple years, guys. And then it goes for another 40 years. And now we look back and we go, oh, Nazis inventing the missiles didn't end the war. It just led to the Cold War. And then you could say, right, Cold War
Yeah.
proxies, right, Mujahideen. Well, now we have those same funded
Yes.
guys pulling off 9/11, and it leads and it
Yes.
leads and it leads.
Well,
It's
this is sobering. Like in the end of every war is the seeds of the next
and I
one.
see
And it seems like that's actually happening right now.
and
I mean,
before
and
our eyes, before our
Biden
eyes.
promised that in two ways. First, preserving and, if you like, purifying the stealth war, the humane war that I wrote about, even in withdrawing from Afghanistan, and second, pivoting to China. And who knows what forms that war will take, but
Yeah.
it's going to be generational, you know. And for those of us who are older than you know, we were told on September, 11th, 2001, that we were going to have to fight a generational war against terror.
Yeah.
Well, that's my life. It didn't work out that well.
Yeah.
And I don't see why young people today would accept a generational war that's the seeds of which are being planted right now.
Yeah, that's like if like your keyboard broke on your computer and you're like, hey Tommy, can you come check out my computer? And I'm like, all right. So what I'm looking at is I think we need 4 flat screens. There's this beautiful new 3090 hard drive. It costs 100. You're like, dude, I just need a new keyboard. You're like, what are we
Right.
talking? What are you doing? This
Right.
whole we're gonna want terabit Ethernet. You're like, dude, I don't. Yeah, I remember I'm 31. I vaguely remember watching the news and I remember them saying, war on terror. And I'm like, but I remember thinking, yeah, we got to go kick these guys' asses. They just, and it's like,
Sure.
but we're not going to stop at Afghanistan. We're going to go and take on every country. And I remember at 11 thinking, I was like, wait, hold on. Like,
Right.
it's like mom saying you
Yeah.
just have to, it's like mom saying you just have
Yeah.
to do one chore. And then you get down there and
Yeah.
your dad's like, all right, we're painting the whole house. And you're like, I've been bamboozled. Like,
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah. Totally.
so it's, but to really zoom out and
Yep.
so if it seems like not seems, but it seems to be not seems, it is an objective truth that the end of every war lays the seeds for the next. And like the sun rising and setting and oceans coming in and out, you start to go, all right, well, it seems to be a cold, hard facet of humanity. We can look at
Yeah.
every war seeding the next,
Yeah.
back to George Washington, back to the popes, back to the barbarians, back to the Romans, forever.
Yeah.
Eventually, you got to go. If these tides of war are going to happen, we are the warring species, is the next best thing you can do.
Yeah.
Yes, we shouldn't do it, is the next best thing you can do. Lower the total number of combatant and civilian deaths. And it,
Oh, absolutely. And I hope I want to be really clear about that, like,
oh, no,
if
you
the
are. Yeah,
choice
you
is
are.
brutal versus humane war, we
Take
choose humane
humane.
war, 7 days a week or whatever, twice on Sunday.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yet I just don't think that's the choice. And one of the big points of my book in the early parts is to remember that, like, people used to accept war as a fact of life until Americans in the 19th century said, wait, we could, like, create a durable peace. And of course,
you're
they were
right.
naive and so forth, but they did get, the UN Charter done. And, in combination with a lot of other factors like American hegemony and nuclear weaponry, we have had great power peace, no direct great power war since 1945. And so that's a huge win. Now,
Yeah,
as I also emphasize, it came at the cost of America beginning to fight the global wars that European empires had been doing for centuries. And that was bad for us and for, everyone who died, especially if we concede that most of those wars weren't worth fighting. So,
yeah,
we're not there yet. But again, just as we say it really matters to compare wars, we really have to compare pieces.
yeah,
And what I mean by that is, no one thinks that you're going to get biblical and get the end of war,
yeah,
but we can say we can institutionalize peace more or less durably.
yeah,
And we've got to figure out how can that be done. And we're partway there, but we're just not very far. And so I want to get Americans back to remember their ancestors who actually thought this was worth trying,
yeah.
rather than just saying, okay, all that matters is brutal versus humane war.
No, that is a brilliant point. And yet, no, and don't worry, you have made it clear in the book and in this podcast. No, yeah, humane over brutal. But you're right. It's what I just said about the rising sun and the tides coming in and out. There also is a limitation to those things, saying, listen, we don't have
Yes.
wings. And eventually the Wright brothers were like, yo, hold my beer. Hold on.
Yeah.
Maybe we can
Right.
enter a new paradigm.
Correct.
I've interviewed
Correct.
Charlie Duke, who's walked on the moon. The
Incredible.
heavens are for the gods. Well, let's,
Yeah.
by the end of this decade, sometimes you can
Correct.
break it. You and I are chatting over video right now. I
That's
mean,
right.
100 years ago,
That's
it'd be like
right.
the telephone's new, but listen, you're never,
Right.
no, we're doing this right now. And then I'm going to upload it to a global brain called the internet and access it from my
Right.
phone. Like,
Correct.
so that was a perfect, pulled up your book. Hey, Siri, listen to me. But you're right. Maybe it does take a change of mindset to go, listen, war doesn't have to. Siri popping up on
Correct.
my, man, Siri, you just interrupted me. Not really helping my case. Maybe it does take an absolute change in mindset of just going, these things, one day cancer will be a thing of the past. Like one day
Right.
it will be, and we won't go, well, cancer is part of life. We'll go, it was for a long
Right.
time.
Right.
I think that's a brilliant point. No, like there can be peace.
Right.
War can be, you drop a bouncy ball, right?
Yep.
Bump, 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 bump. Those are all wars. Each one's getting more humane, less brutal. That doesn't mean it bounces forever. Let's drive it
Right.
more humane until it goes. And then we go, hey, why does the ball even have to bounce?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's the,
And again, it's not forever. It's just
no.
saying, how can we durably institutionalize peace until that breaks down?
Yeah.
Because it's as if we think there's no alternative to endless American war. Well, there actually is
Yeah.
an alternative, and it's just at least fighting a couple less,
Yeah.
and then a couple less, and as you say, maybe weaning yourself from it
I
altogether,
was, I was about to
except
say,
when you really need the hit.
I was about to say you walked right back into my analogy, my trap.
Right.
You walked
Right.
right back in.
Right.
But no, but that's what it is oftentimes it's, it's don't look at it as, can I go the next 50 years without taking a clonazepam? You go, hey man, can you get through today? That's all I'm asking of you. And you go, I can get
Yep.
through today. And then you wake up the next day and you go, can you just get through one more day? And
Yep.
my mom, a nurse, actually gave me a brilliant piece of information or a piece of advice. Full disclosure, it's been almost 6 years since I've taken clonazepam. But
Oh,
I remember she said, she
congratulations.
goes, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's my brother's suicide really, really kind of fuck shit up for a little bit. Excuse my French.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I remember she said, she goes, there's a brilliant thing in keeping one. And I did this when I was weaning. Keep one. And or I've interviewed guys who have talked about, they keep a beer in the refrigerator. They haven't drank in 10 years, but they keep it there and they go,
Right.
if it gets really bad, it's right there. And they go,
Sure.
but because of
Sure.
that, they never touch it. So it's almost like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
don't have to go peace Americana, no wars till 3000. We
Correct.
go, hey, maybe let's try to get through until 2030,
Yeah.
no wars. Let's just try it,
Yeah.
guys. Put our best foot
Or
forward.
we've got the nukes, and if you take 10% of the current military budget and you want to build some drones or whatever, feel free.
Yeah.
But what if we took the other $600 billion and put it towards, I don't know, like a
Healthcare,
functioning
infrastructure,
train system, like healthcare,
some maglev trains, some gigabit
so
Ethernets,
yeah,
crazy
so,
ideas. But
or like just give it to people who are 20 to 30 to launch their lives.
yeah,
That's
just
what I
fucking get
think.
started. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's an unrealistic. It's I don't think it's this, kumbaya. I do think it's
Sure.
realistic. I think it can
Yeah.
happen as long as you've said multiple times in here, and as I agree with you 110%, you have to reserve the right for that because sometimes there are assholes like Hitler or Osama bin
Yep.
Laden. They exist,
No doubt.
and
No doubt.
they do have to be. That's just the reality.
Of
But
course. Agreed.
you've provided me a moment of growth today. Why does I know I keep harking on that, but yeah, why does it have to be the argument between humane and brutal? Why can't it also be don't do it at all? And I think that's, thank you. You have
No
changed my
problem.
awareness. And
Well,
but
thank you for having me. I
yeah, man,
really enjoyed it.
we've run. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. We've run about an hour, so let's wrap this one up. But Dr. Samuel Moyn, author of Humane, for everybody listening, if you want a less of a back and forth not arguing with ourselves, get the book. It's a fantastic listen. I put it on 2x speed. It's like a 4-hour book, or 8 hours. It's great. I won't spoil it for the listeners. Your opening sequence, by the way, absolutely brilliant. The whole wedding comparison. I mean, that could be the opening of a movie. That was enthralling. But I'd love to have you on again sometime.
Sure. Yeah. Anytime.
Choked on my words. So, yeah. I'd love to have you on again sometime. Dr. Samuel Moyn, author of Humane. I'll put it in the description. And thank you for helping me close out 2021, because this is the last episode until January. So episode 653.
Have a great holiday and Happy New Year.
Thank you so much. Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Stay safe. Love each other. Peace is an option. It doesn't just have to be humane or brutal. Much
Peace
like
on earth, goodwill to men.
Much like political discourse during a family holiday dinner, it doesn't have to be lightly or heavily political. It can just be watch football and drink. Like it can just be that. Yeah. Peace on earth, goodwill to man. Dr. Moyn, thank you, sir. I'll send you an email when this one is uploaded. Thank you very much for coming on here. Take care, everybody.
Have a good night.
You as well, man.